This is the first of a handful of videos about money. Specifically, how to negotiate with your news director when you get a job offer. The short of it is that in your first and your second job, you're not going to have much leverage because you don't have much professional experience. But as you get more experience, more awards, and do more stories that get laws passed, that hold people accountable, that are strong stories, then you'll have more leverage. And to be honest, here's what I mean by leverage. That the news director would much rather hire you than the dozens of other people who are applying as well. And dozens, sometimes hundreds apply for the same on-air job at any one individual TV station. So, the quality of your work and the awards you have are what to begin with and what will separate you from those people. And again, obviously you can see how this is a challenge when getting your first or your second job because you're probably going to have little and few of both. Here's a good rule of thumb for you. In a small to medium-sized market, ask for $1,000 to $2,000 more than the offer. Then, when you get to an upper medium-sized market or a large market, you can ask for at least $5,000 more because you have more experience and are bringing other unique attributes to the station. The short version here is that in your first job, you don't have much room to negotiate because the news director knows that you don't have any professional experience. In fact, to get that experience, you need the job. Also, too, when it comes to money, they don't care where you went to school. The offer will pretty much be the same because there are dozens of other people who are willing to take that offer. Now, if you and the news director happen to be from the same school, then he or she may offer you the job first. But again, the money will stay the same. Negotiation does get easier as you move from job to job because your skills increase. And therefore, you can market yourself differently than the others who are applying. Are you doing active live shots? Do you do sequence stand-ups? Can you prove that you do breaking news well? These are some of the things that'll make you stand out. And of course your news director will definitely expect that you can do breaking news well. But if you do it well with active live shots, what's known in the industry as a show and tell live shot, you'll stand apart from the others applying. Also too, the bigger the station and the bigger the market also means that they have more money to pay staff. And with that, the ranking of the station in its market is important in knowing if the station has money. The number one ranked station in your market will have the most money because they get to sell their 30-second commercial spots at the highest rate because they're number one, because people watch them the most. The number two station in your market will have some money because, after all, it's number two, but the one to watch is the number three station. They won't have nearly as much money because it's in third place. Some markets have more than 3 stations. They have 4. In ABC, CBS, NBC, and Fox. The fourth station will obviously have the least amount of money. Third and fourth are always, for lack of a better term, the poorest. There are a few markets with a fifth CW-TV affiliate, but basically here, all the math and the rankings is the same. Third, fourth, and fifth aren't going to have a whole lot of money. Your first and second stations will by far have the most, and the first definitely has the most, and sometimes far more, than the second station. Your third, fourth, and fifth stations are usually the ones with the most aging gear, also aging news cars, and of course, lowest employee morale, mostly because the station can't afford to make their employees happy. The rest of this video is going to walk you through my experience negotiating, as well as some other important information about it that you should know. And again, asking for $1,000 to $2,000 more is probably what to ask for once an offer is made, because it'll sound reasonable. For lack of a better term, it's not going to make you sound crazy or in fantasy land by asking for $3,000, $4,000, or $5,000 more. Now, if you happen to get salary information from someone who works at the station and you learn what the offer should be in advance, let's say $22,000, but instead the news director lowballs you with an offer of $18,000, in this particular case, you know that you can ask for $4,000 more for a grand total of $22,000 a year. But here's why I'm saying all this. When I negotiated with NBC5 in Dallas, I asked for $4,000 more, and the news director immediately said yes. Now, she had done this too because as a one-person band, she was paying me less than a regular full-time, what we call straight reporter, because they're working with a photographer. But still, she said yes to $4,000. It took me 5-10 seconds to ask. That part of the conversation was like 20 seconds. 20 seconds, $4,000. So I use that as an example of when they put down a job offer, ask for a little bit more, because the worst they can say is no. It's just when you ask, you have to be able to say this with confidence. So $4,000 or $5,000, you can't do that? I understand. Do what you're comfortable with, because again, it's that confidence that may actually get you that money. And again, the goal, if possible, is to at least get you a little bit more than what the blanket offer is. And obviously, too, when we're talking about NBC5, it's hard to compare. It's a major station in a major market that's corporately owned by Comcast. Your small to medium market station, while yes, they'll have a large corporate owner, they may not be able to give somebody the $4,000 bump. So do realize that even I realize this isn't an exact comparison. The overall point why I'm telling you this is because that you're not going to know what you could have gotten unless you ask for it. So again, when it comes to a number, ask for what you're comfortable with. Contacts. To begin to get an idea of what the pay is in the market from where your offer will come from, you want to reach out to your network and ask them. This is a great thing to combine with how much you'll ask for on top of the contract. Because if your research is showing that, let's say, the job is $25,000 and they offer you $25,000, you know independently that these actually match. So if you want to ask for a couple thousand more in this situation, that's good. Asking for $5,000, going from 25 to 30, when everybody else you've independently asked is saying that it's 25,000, they might see you crazy here. So that's how you balance and how you figure all of this out. So who do you ask? Well, a professional mentor of yours may have worked in that market or know somebody who does. Your professors might know or know someone to ask. And sometimes I've been asked myself and didn't know the answer, but I knew somebody who would, so I asked them and we got the student or that professional a good answer. And obviously the best case scenario is that you know somebody at that station who's working there right now and will tell you everything privately. But most of the time, you're probably not going to know anybody on the inside. And that brings us to databases, one other resource for you. There are databases out there where people have anonymously reported how much money they make in a particular job and what their job title is. But the problem with these is, one, they're anonymous, so you don't know if the person is real or not, and there are so many different job titles for the same job that it's almost impossible to compare. For example, there are multiple titles for my job, a one-person band. As we've talked about before, it's also called one-man band, video journalist, multimedia journalist, multi-platform journalist, multi-skilled journalist, and the list goes on. Plus, it's your station's parent company that creates that job title. And again, while we know that all of those job titles are really in reality the same job, it's still wrong for us to assume that the salaries attached to any one of them would be the same, because different companies give a different value to those different titles. And this is again all what makes this so hard to compare. And that's why asking your contacts, actually asking a human, is the best way. Moving on now, here are some things to consider. If they won't give you that salary increase up front, what about a pay raise in the second year? I've certainly seen that in contracts. If the news director won't budge on the original offer, ask if you can be paid more in the second year of your contract. They might say no, but presenting the question as, okay, Is the company open to paying $25,000 the first year and then $27,000 the next year? Will that work? Again, they might say no, but asking the question is a regular negotiating question. And asking the question just like that, that's how it's done. Some other things you can ask for but probably won't get are a clothing allowance or makeup allowance. And that's just because a lot of stations just don't do that anymore. If it did, it'd probably be about $500 extra a year to put towards clothes and makeup, but again, that's a very general number. In my experience, it was rare that they were given to people in news. They certainly weren't in my first job. When I got to NBC5, there were a few special circumstances, but in general, it really seemed like the answer was no. But if you want to ask, go ahead. After all, you don't know until you ask. Now comes moving expenses, and these you should be getting. This is completely appropriate for you to ask for and is a standard thing for you to ask for. If you don't ask for anything else I've said in this video, this one you need to ask for, especially if you're moving from a different state because it's gonna be expensive to move. In small markets, you'll probably get nothing. So don't expect anything, but again, the point here is that it's definitely okay for you to ask. And something to keep in mind is that the money you get for the moving expenses will be taxed by the federal government, and possibly the state as well if you're working in a state that has a state income tax. I've heard numbers in this area as random as $1,000 to $5,000, but again, that $5,000 was a big company in a major market. So I've heard typically for small and medium, when they were given, because they're not always given, anywhere between $1,000 and $2,500. It is perfectly fine to ask for $2,000 in moving expenses because that's what it's going to cost to get the U-Haul from here to there, especially when you're out of state. If you're moving an hour and a half or something south, which it's kind of actually hard to do that because medium markets, as you know, sort of have a 2-hour radius in terms of drive time. So yeah, wherever you're driving from, $2,000 by the time you pay taxes, you might break even on the move once you get the van, once you pack up all the boxes, and the actual gas you've got to put in the truck to actually drive it down. So if you want to go in at $2,500 and see what they say, at least you can negotiate down lower than that. My major point here is don't let anybody try to speak like stupid onto you or something like that. They may try to speak this guilt onto you, or these adults that sit in these news director chairs, they're going to act surprised, like, oh, they're crazy for asking for this amount of money. No, you're not, because I guarantee you they've asked for it too, every single time, and are doing this to throw you off your game. So with that, obviously now if that happens, you won't be. Now, something else that you want to know in terms of how will you be taxed on not only your actual income, but the moving expenses should you get them, is typically somebody in your situation is going to be anywhere between the 12% and 22% federal income tax bracket. Now, I don't know what exemptions someone might have or some other things that may bring down their taxes, but that's a really good box that's going to capture a lot of people in their first, second, and third jobs. If you're in your first job, expect to be in that 12% bracket because you'll probably make somewhere between $20,000 and $30,000. If you move to a better market in your second job, you can definitely make above $30,000, probably something more like $35,000. And if you can get to a good #1 station between market 50 and 60, you can probably get into the 40s. I say all this because I was originally offered $44,000 to work in Memphis, and they raised the offer themselves to $48,000 once they knew that Dallas was involved. And that market was market 50. And this is also, too, what gave me the confidence to ask the Dallas news director for $4,000 more. I had never considered it. Never before in my life had I asked for anything above what the offer was, because I wanted the work so badly. But when Memphis just automatically raised the offer without me asking, I went, well, I really want to do Dallas as well. I'm kind of curious if they'll raise their amount. And again, I was very lucky. Their answer was an immediate yes. And both those jobs were as a one-person band, 5 days a week. So you might find a reporter might be paid a little bit more because the reporter may have 2 or 3 more years of experience. So now contract length. And again, just to be clear here, there are going to be 2 types of contracts that you'll probably see. The first is your standard reporting contract, which is 2 years long. I would not recommend signing anything longer than that, not even 3 years, just as a reporter, because you're going to want to move on after 2 years. And your news director will already know this and will more than likely offer you a standard 2-year contract. The second type of contract that you might run into is an anchor reporter contract. And those are typically 3 years. And the reason why goes back to the marketing that we had talked about earlier. When you anchor, you automatically become one of the most recognizable faces of the station. The station is also going to spend both money and time branding you in on-air promos and print advertisements and maybe even billboards to increase your visibility. And this is to make sure that people know that you are actually a face of the station. Because they're doing this, they want to guarantee that you're going to stick around for a while so they can get a return on their investment. On this particular point, I actually do understand where they're coming from. And one more thing here. In the future, when you're in a market that you actually like and that you might want to stick around a while for, because maybe you want to raise a family or you like the city, the vibe's right for you, you can offer to have a longer contract, and because of that commitment, also ask for more money a year, because you're making a more significant and a longer commitment to the station. I don't know a lot of people who've done this, but I do know some, so it's something to keep in mind. Now let's talk about outs. The last part of negotiation that we're going to talk about, that we need to talk about, that is just as important as negotiating your salary, and that is what's called having outs in your contract. What this means, this is a way out of your contract if you want to leave before the contract is over without being fined or possibly sued, sued by the station. The short version of all this is you can't leave because you're under contract, unless there's some kind of a medical emergency or some other emergency or life event that truly can't be controlled. Whether or not a station fights you on even that will again be very individual. Some of these stations are not going to be nice. They're going to fight you regardless of what your circumstance is. And that's just the truth. We're going to be talking about the specifics of outs, how to get them in your contract, some suggestions of what they can be a little bit later. Now, working for another station in the same market. So, if you signed a regular 2-year reporting contract with that station, and after the first year, the public information officer position magically opens at the mayor's office or some other agency, and you want to get out of news, and you want the job because it pays more, it's better hours, and it's overall, of course, a lot less stress than working in news. Here's what's going to happen. The station is going to fight you from taking that job because you still owe them a year of employment. You can sue to get out of it, but it's probably not going to be worth the money. You're making so little that it's going to cost a lot to get a lawyer to crowbar you out of this. And that's even if they can. Some stations, some of their corporate owners, fight hard. It's far less stress to wait out that year of news to get out of news. And yeah, that particular job is going to be filled by then, but that, believe me when I tell you, is less stress than trying to fight your station. Here is where you're most likely going to encounter friction. Let's use Springfield, Illinois as an example. It's media market 82, so it would have been reasonable for me to ask for what's called top 50 outs, meaning After my first year, so with a 1 year left on my contract, or if the station didn't go for that, to say the last 6 months of my contract, that the outs do what's called taking effect. Meaning, if I get a job in the top 50 or higher, somewhere in there, market 50 to market 1, I can leave. No questions asked, no lawyers, I can leave, which is awesome. So the trick becomes negotiating, hey, what market size can you go in? And sometimes news directors fight you on that. If you're asking, is everything a fight in TV news? The unfortunate answer to that is yes. With that though, having your outs kick in during the last 6 months of your contract is actually perfectly fine. And 6 months may actually be standard now. It's certainly more than enough to make your next move. But back to our example, top 50 markets. Top 50 markets would have meant that if I got a job at a station in one of the top 50 media markets, that I could freely leave my current job and go to the news station. Now, the news director in market 70 whatever or 80 whatever might not agree to top 50, in which case what I would have done is lowered to top 40 or top 30. And my hope would be that in terms of top 40, there wouldn't be much of a fight on there because it's gonna take you a year and a half to raise the level of your reporting, of your storytelling for a station at 40, 39 on down to notice you, call you back, bring you in, like you, and then make you a job offer. So if you're getting pushback at top 40 on down from a station that is 70 or higher, just know that they're making it difficult just to make it difficult. But even after telling you that story, I had a solution for this. For example, if a news director wasn't going to let me put broad ranges of outs in my contract, like top 50, top 40, top 30, what I would have asked for were outs that were for specific stations. I would have personally asked for NPPA stations where I had mentors and friends, because unbeknownst to the news director, I may be able to get in. Plus, I wanted to work there anyway because those are the good stations, and I knew the people on the inside that could help me get there, and of course know that they would help with morale. It would feel good to work in that place with those people. Is the whole shop happy and nice? Who knows? Probably not. But having 3, 4, or 5 storytellers on staff that you can connect with and collaborate with and talk to, that is huge. And I wouldn't have necessarily put these in any particular order. I mean, I might have by market size, but when you're talking about higher ranked stations in terms of quality and performance, market size begins to not matter because they're all like in the top 30 or the top 20. And just some of those stations would have been KARE 11 in Minnesota, WBFF in Baltimore, Maryland, King 5 in Seattle, Washington, the ABC and NBC in San Diego, and KUSA in Denver, Colorado, again, just to name a few. And one more quick point too. If you're in sports, ask for ESPN to be written into your contract. Even if you have to wait until the last 6 months of your contract for your outs to kick in, that's fine, because you probably won't be looking for a job until then anyway. And even though my personal recommendation is that you always look for a job, most I talk to never do until those last 6 months. One last topic to talk about is one that is closely related to what we are, and that's called the non-compete clause. That's a standard clause in your contract that says should you leave the station, you cannot work for any other station for usually the term is 6 months after you leave. What the kind of idea is that sort of like your news star will have faded, that in this 6 months because you were off the air, like nobody would recognize you, so why would an other station want to brand you? Things like that. That part of it I've never seen pan out because typically when people get out and they're in the same town, they're working for some other private company. They got out of news, so to speak. The other reason why this is done is to protect the station's investment in you, because no matter if you were an anchor or a reporter, both are on air. So people recognize you, you've been branded with that station, and they see that as something valuable. So they don't want to say that your experience at their station was only so that you could go work at a competing one and now work against them. Again, I've never known or seen of any evidence of this, and I've met hundreds of news people, and among them also managers. I've never actually heard of, oh, we lost this person to that station and now that station, they now dominate. Anchors and reporters certainly do move around, and anchors, if you're rooted in a major market, if one is not re-signed or decides not to resign, you will see in these major markets this person take 6 months off and just chill for 6 months. And then 6 months and 1 day later, you will find that usually the competition has made them an offer and the anchor has accepted. But again, this is like top 30, top 20 market kinds of stuff, or a market to where that anchor was entrenched for so long. And to be entrenched, we're talking decades, 10, 20, 30 years, where a competing station then wants to build on their brand. But again, these examples are so few and far between that the general logic that we're gonna do this for everybody, I've always found a little crazy. And now let's talk about enforcement. You'll periodically find lawsuits of people trying to sue to overturn non-compete agreements, and non-compete agreements are used in many industries. This isn't just a news, not just a TV thing. But there are only about 4 states in the US that have actually made them illegal. And those states are California, Montana, North Dakota, and Oklahoma. Other states may have varying rules about what a company can or can't reasonably enforce through a non-compete, but to find out what those are, you'll have to do some Googling based on what state you're working in. And that's it. Really, seriously. I know this is a long video, but this is one of the most important videos in this course. This is one of the ones that makes this worth the money. This is stuff I did not learn until I had to learn it the hard way, and it wasn't all at once. It was spread across years and experiences and various managers, and not knowing where to get the information. You can understand how nuts that was. So, hopefully this helps give you a better understanding of all of this. And I know I say this in every video, but as always, if you have any questions specifically about this, negotiation, what they're offering you, what's in your contract, please feel free to reach out. And I'll see you in the next video.